Good evening, Ananda. We'll be starting our session in 5 minutes. Good evening, one and all. We welcome you all to the International Webinar Series on Holistic Health, Well-being and Sustainable Development 2022, commemorating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, nation celebrating 75 years of independence, and United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030 as part of awareness and campaigns in collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute and Center for Art, Sciences and Wellbeing. Before we start our sessions for the day, let's take the blessings of Almighty.
Kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampadah Shubham kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampadah Shatru buddhi vinashaya Deepajyotirnamostute Deepajyotirnamostute Shubham kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampadah Shubham kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampadah
With the blessings of Almighty, we shall continue to today's session. We apologize for the delay. Actually, we have another upcoming conference, so we were in the discussions. Yeah. So today, as usual, we all know that we are daily doing commemoration of international, regional, national, local, as well as, significant decades, years, months, weeks, days, commemorations every day. So today is a very significant day, especially when we are talking about freedom of speech and expression. Media, especially journalists, those are the ones who bring news and, in spite of all odds and events, they contribute. And without their contribution, we wouldn't have so much privilege of, having news from across the world. So today we are commemorating International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. And today is also Broadcast Traffic Professionals Day. These are also media professionals. And also National Traffic Directors Day. This is also related to media. And National Professionals Day. This is also related to media. And apart from that, we have related commemorations also. National Stress Awareness Day and Dynamic Harmlessness Day and Be the Impact Day, which all are closely related to each other. And apart from that, we have Ballot Day, that is with respect to dance, performance, arts forms. And we have National Advent Calendar Day related to calendar. And, look for the Circles Day and many more. Every day we are having almost, 100 to 150 commemorations. But we will not take up everything because of the time constraints. So we are just picking up some hand-picked days and we are discussing. And today is also All Saints Day, that is Day of the Dead. Like as already mentioned, all cults, all religions derived similar concepts from Sanatana Dharma. So like we have Pitrumas and, Mahalaya Paksha and all those things. Every religion also have dedicated certain, these days dedicated to the dead ones, departed souls. So this day they feel, they believe, particularly a religion that celebrates this day, they believe that the dead visit them. And so they commemorate this rather than telling celebrities may not be appropriate. But, once they're deceased, they become part of, Almighty and gods. They call angels also. So sometimes we can say celebrate also because, when they are a godly men or women or angels or something, whatever they are being called. So let's use commemoration on a safer side. So apart from this, there are other days also. We'll see if time permits. So let's start with the International Day. To end impunity for crimes against journalists. It is commemorated on 2nd November. It is very important day for media and media professionals. So being part of media, being a media professional, so it is also important for us, especially. And with the theme for 2022, countering threats of violence and crimes against journalists to protect freedom of expression for all. If you see from 2016 to the end of 2020, 400 journalists were killed for their work or while on job. These are global statistics. not related to any one country. So, because whenever we are commemorating at a global level, international level, we are taking the world statistics. So it should not be implied to any particular country as such, unless until it is stated. So because the figures maybe are mostly these statistics are reported. There might be many, numbers or a huge numbers. Those are not reported. As we see generally, reported cases are often very less. And even reported also, they might not be categorized accordingly due to various reasons. So there is a caution when coming to statistics. I want to make a clarification here along with disclaimer. So from 2016 to end of 2020, 400 journalists were killed for their work and while on the job, and 274 journalists were imprisoned in 2030, the highest yearly total in 3 decades. In last 30 years, the highest journalists who were imprisoned was in 2020, that is 274 journalists, and only 13% of the cases recorded by UNESCO since 2006 are currently considered judicially resolved. So, only just 13% of recorded. Unrecorded, there might be many. But in that, among them also, only 13% of the cases are currently considered judicially resolved. 73% of the women journalists surveyed has experienced online violence in the course of their work. The violence doesn't just happen, physically, but also a lot of online violence also happens. They are under surveillance, journalists especially. Their phones are trapped, their internet activity, their accounts are monitored. Their entire activity, physical or online activities, under surveillance. So, and they are being, observed, monitored. So that gives, a lot of, restrictions or constraints. So this day, especially ending impunity for crimes against journalists is one of the most pressing issues to guarantee freedom of expression and access to information for all citizens. Between 2006 and 2020, over 1,200 journalists have been killed for reporting the news and bringing information to the public. So in 9 out of 10 cases, the killers go unpunished. This is the most sad part of it. The conviction rate has been always, very low. Because of that, people don't have, trust this judicial system. And there are a lot of complications. On one side, it's very easy to approach, and other side, it is so complex also. And after that, approaching is one thing, but, getting justice, a kind of practice that is happening with the judicial system, unfortunately, with all due respect, is justice delayed, is justice denied. Justice is not, delivered within the time. What is the use if justice is delayed, justice is provided after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, sorry. Sometimes we see the verdict comes out only after the person passes away. So the kind of, with all due respects, but unfortunately, this is kind of maybe corruption, or what you call this kind of injustice that is happening is, delay of justice. That is the greatest, where even the judicial system is also getting a very bad reputation or name, because they are not able to deliver justice. Of course, they are also protecting, because, innocent should not be punished. But at the same time, the perpetrator or the ones who commit suicide, the crime or, any violence should not be left out. So that should also be ensured. But somehow, that conviction rates conveys a different connotation. If you see, of course, there may be many false cases, but still, the crime rate is increasing. That conveys, that a proper message is not being conveyed. Where people who are committing crimes, they think that they can easily get away from this system. A kind of message that is being conveyed, through these conviction rates, through these complexities also, can give support or maybe give confidence also to these perpetrators or criminals or violators who can get away. That's why, they don't even, they even sometimes, not only just journalists, many judges were killed and lawyers were killed. And this doesn't end with journalists who bring out information. It goes on to bureaucrats also. And even at times, these ministers and, leaders were also assassinated. So this doesn't end at anywhere or any point. So this is very important for everyone to ensure that, especially when we are in legal profession, we have to ensure that justice is, given in appropriate time. And justice delayed is justice denied. And that will give rise to more scope for more crimes and for also, managing or manipulating the verdict or, the further victimization of the victim. And it also gives a lot of scope of corruption. So keeping all these aspects with all due respects to judicial system, because at the end of the day, we trust them and we want an highest, we have highest expectations from them to upkeep peace, security, and justice among the nation or even we have international codes, international laws, treaties. So overall justice, law and order justice has to be maintained. So we have to ensure that the system is adequately manpowered, that is human powered, resources and infrastructure, and ensure that conviction rates are also, should be very high. Not even a 10% of conviction rate. It is very easy. The other message that conveys is there are 90% of chances that you can get away. That kind of confidence when judicial system is directly or indirectly providing or it is conveying through, with that conviction rates, what kind of confidence or what kind of fear that it creates with the perpetrators or the criminals or the violators. It is in a general notion, how, so that should be, that should be changed. So maybe in coming days, we will see more reforms in judicial system. Anyway, that altogether is a different topic. They have their own problems. Every occupation or every system has its own internal problems, external problems. So we will discuss when we have, because we were commemorating Lawyers' Day, Judges' Day, Judgment Day, all days are there, and we spoke on those days also. So coming days, we will also focus on those things. We can invite few from legal professionals, and we can try to understand what are the challenges. We cannot blame anyone. We cannot, every profession, every occupation has its own challenges and limitations. We'll try to understand what is happening, why this kind of delay is happening. So Impunity leads to more killings, and it is often a symptom of worsening conflict and the breakdown of law and judicial systems. So as we see in 9 out of 10 cases, the killers go unpunished. And according to the UNESCO Observatory of Killed Journalists, and it is a very sad part. And while killings are the most extreme form of media censorship, journalists are also subjected to countless threats, ranging from kidnapping, torture, and other physical attacks to harassment, particularly in the digital sphere. They are, as said, they are continuously, abused, and they are continuously trolled, and different forms of, harassment also takes place. And threats of violence and attacks against journalists in particular create a climate for the fear for media professionals, impeding the free circulation of information, opinions, ideas for all citizens. Especially with women, journalists are particularly impacted by the threats and attacks, notably by those online. According to the UNESCO's discussion paper, The Chilling Global Trends in the Online Violence Against Women Journalists, 73% of the women journalists surveyed said that they have been threatened, intimidated, and insulted online in connection to their work. See, 73%. That is very high. Almost three-fourths of the women journalists are abused, harassed online. What does that mean? That kind of high percentage of, often we have percentages where most of the percentage are secure, but here you see how difficult it is. Can you imagine how women journalists or media professionals struggle? Thinking of even taking media as a profession is a very bold decision. It's putting everything behind in, your life also at risk, and joining the media. And when you know the statistics, it's not someone saying, it's the UNESCO itself. When giving these statistics, that is an United Nations organization, such a reputed organization, when it is publishing officially, where 192, 193 countries are members, and these are official statistics, what does it convey? So it also conveys a total failure of the judicial system, where 73%, less than 10% conviction rate, and more than 75% of journalists are, being harassed. So what does it convey? So it is only effective up to 25%, that is 75%, but three-fourths of its, system is impaired, and there is no protection. So there is a lot to improve. On the other side, it conveys a different meaning. And while killings are most extreme from the form of media censorship, as already mentioned, and threats of violence and attacks against journalists, especially in particular, create a climate of fear, and they don't have this freedom of expression or freedom of, to express their opinions openly, write about them. And they have a lot of impediments for the free circulation of information, opinions, or ideas for all citizens. It is across the globe. And especially in some countries, it is very difficult. And women journalists, as already mentioned, especially those who are working with online media, electronic media, at least print media to a certain extent, okay, it's fine. But those who are online and electronic media, they face literally huge threats and attacks. And according to various reports, and in many cases, threats of violence against journalists are not properly investigated. And most of the time, that investigation also doesn't happen properly. Inquiry also doesn't happen. And this impunity emboldens the perpetrators of the crime at the same time has a chilling effect on the society, including journalists themselves. Now, how do you expect journalists to be fair when a journalist himself is not, being protected? How can you expect such a fair news to come? And in many cases, the UNESCO or the law enforcement agencies or law protection agencies seems to have a side eye or a low eye towards these such cases. And UNESCO is also concerned that impunity damages whole societies by covering up serious human rights abuse. It's also violation of human rights. Journalists are also human beings. No, they are working for the human rights and also welfare of the society, and they are contributing information. But again, when they are, at high risk, high threat, they are not being protected. They are not being safeguarded. And it's a serious human right abuse and corruption and crime. And you can read lots of stories, and facts where you can see a lot of abuse, attacks that happened on the journalists. We will take up if time permits. On the other hand, justice systems that vigorously investigate all threats of violence against journalists send a powerful message that society will not tolerate attacks against journalists and against the right to freedom of expression for all. That's why we don't say it, but at the same time, they are not doing anything. They are doing, but considerably by the statistics, they need to do a lot. That is what, required. Because now when we are talking about looking at the conviction rate of less than 10%, and 75% of the journalists are still being attacked and, abused, and a lot of things are happening. So there is a lot to be done than presently what is being done. At the same time, they are doing their best efforts, but that is not enough at all. When 75% of the people are not safe, can we say that people are safe? So until we make at least, 75% people are safe and 25% is at risk, then maybe we can call it as, most of the population is safe. So there is a lot that needs to be done. There is a huge gap that has to be addressed. And this year is the 10th anniversary of the UN Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists. So this day also commemorates the UN Plan of Action on the Safety of 10 years, that is 10th anniversary of the United Nations Plan of Action, the safety of journalists and the issue of impunity is the first connected effort within the United Nations to address attacks and impunity of crimes against journalists with a multi-stakeholder and a holistic approach. It brings together UN bodies, national authorities, media, and civil society organizations. Since the plan was adopted, the issue of safety of journalists have gained a higher visibility in the United Nations, as evidenced by the increasing number of declarations, resolutions, and other normative texts. And the UN Secretary General calls to action for human rights. Protecting journalists is also part of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And the plan has also contributed to the building international coalitions of governments and the civil society and served to bring about changes to the ground, on the ground, and such as creation of national safety mechanisms in at least 50 countries. And but despite of all these achievements, challenges still exist. the high rate of impunity for crimes against journalists persists and new forms of threats are developed in unprecedented ways. So these are just reported, and you can imagine what would be the volume of crimes or abuse that has been, or the killings that has been happening. If reported itself says this kind of projects, this kind of statistics, you can imagine what kind of reality the underreported cases might be. It by thinking itself or by visualizing itself is is so fearful that even working in media itself is a greatest challenge and greatest risk one has to take. But it doesn't mean it's not to create a fear, or it's not to create a kind of opinion that it is not safe. But at the same time, when there is such information that can be threatening to one's life or position, not every information is that complex, but certain things, especially with investigative journalism, or when it is related to crime or corruption, especially, so they face more of such kind of abuse, attacks. But in otherwise, where there are some soft stories or soft news, we call, so where there is not a series of serious things like lifestyle or entertainment, or related to education or related to science, or maybe not major disciplines, where there is no threat. I mean, it's okay, whatever is there, that is not targeting anyone. So whatever is there, you are reporting. But especially in investigative journalism, politics, and in bureaucracy, which is related to governments or bureaucrats, there is a huge threat. And most of the attacks or most of the crimes happen there. And in 2022, actually today, there was also an main event to celebrate International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists in a high-level multi-stakeholder conference. So today it was happening. It concluded, I think, in Vienna, Austria, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That entire 12 hours it was there, with the theme protecting media to protect democracy. Sorry, it's going to be tomorrow. Today's is concluded, and tomorrow and day after tomorrow we are having an international conference, multi-stakeholder, on safety of journalists. So one can attend. UNESCO is also organizing a series of regional consultations with local stakeholders to take a stock on the progress and challenging to protect journalists in the last 10 years, and to strategize how to implement the plan more effectively, building upon the success stories and lessons learned in specific context of each region. Two thematic consultations will focus on internet transparency and safety of women journalists. So even our today's day is also registered as part of events. This event is also part of 2022 events with UNESCO. We are also as part of celebrations across the world. In India, we are commemorating, and you can see our event also listed in the UNESCO. I mean, it was informed to the UNESCO as part of events today. And so this year, the slogan is, knowing the truth is protecting the truth. We'll watch a small video. Just let me know in chat box if you have any sound issues.
When you're covering humanitarian crises, journalistic information is often a matter of life and death.
Between 2010 and 2019, close to 900 journalists were killed because they're journalists.
Around the world, the COVID pandemic gave an excuse to crack down on press freedom.
Journalism doesn't have the revenues that it needs to do the kind of serious journalism, investigative reporting that is necessary.
Lies, laced with anger and hate, spread faster and further than facts.
Y reportes como el reporte de UNESCO ponen la lupa en el lugar que corresponde. Muestran que lo que puede parecer normal en una sociedad que no protege la libertad de expresión, en realidad no es normal.
We can be optimistic about the future of journalism because more and more people are realizing how important it is.
So you have seen by United Nations and various other organizations like UNICEF and other, what is the seriousness of impunity. And how do we stop impunity for crimes against journalists? Let's look at a short video. Then we'll go on to background.
Are journalists. Your perception of them might be positive or negative, depending on your view. But have you considered that they are protecting your right to public information? The information we receive shapes our world. But imagine if those who protect our access to it are removed by people who want to prevent certain information becoming public. What world would that shape? In 2010, two young journalists working as interns for a local Mexican newspaper were sitting in a parked car outside of a mall when gunmen opened fire, killing 21-year-old Luis Carlos Santiago Orozco and severely injuring his 18-year-old colleague. The killers fled, but the operation was indicative of a drug cartel settling the score. The cartel's target was the newspaper the victims worked for because, unlike some other media agencies in the city, their newspaper had still been reporting on drug war-related crimes. However, this was the second killing of one of its journalists in 2 years, which led the newspaper to respond with a front-page editorial addressing the cartels. In it, they directly asked them what they should be publishing to avoid further death, injury, and intimidation of its staff. This is how a zone of silence begins, where reporting is no longer independent but controlled by those with power, like drug lords, corrupt officials, businessmen, and politicians. A zone where people cannot access information freely because journalists feel too threatened to report the news. Crimes against journalists are not just limited to a handful of countries. They occur anywhere where the powerful and corrupt want to hide the truth. That means in almost every country, attacks against journalists are committed, including harassment, intimidation, arbitrary imprisonment, kidnappings, violent attacks, and murder. Since 1993, 1,438 journalists have been killed, but the more shocking fact is that for every 10 cases of journalists murdered, only one ends in successful prosecution of the perpetrators. These killings include those dying while reporting armed conflict, but the majority are killed in countries without armed conflict, where journalists are uncovering local stories that some would prefer hidden. In many cases, those involved in these crimes are powerful enough to obstruct investigations and justice, but in other cases, impunity comes from bottlenecks within the justice system itself. In some countries, it's due to justice systems lacking human and financial resources. In others, it's due to corruption and a lack of transparency. While in some cases, it's a lack of knowledge of good practices to investigate these crimes. This often results in the killing of a journalist just being considered a common crime that has no connection to their profession. These shortcomings in justice systems lead to cases taking many years to resolve, if at all. They represent a breakdown in security and the rule of law, which furthers the cycle of violence against journalists. And where does this lead? To the expansion of global zones of silence. Zones where only powerful people decide the news you hear. Zones which violate our freedom of expression and our collective right as a society to access information. So, how do we solve this? The way forward starts with acknowledging the complexity of these crimes and considering them as crimes against freedom of expression, not just individuals. Central to solving this issue are judicial actors, those responsible for investigating and prosecuting these crimes. Collective knowledge of how to break the cycle of impunity is required to solve the issue, and efforts are currently being made to address this. UNESCO, for instance, is offering global online training, aiming to increase the understanding of international freedom of expression standards among judicial actors and law enforcement agencies. Support is being offered to journalists for their legal battles against attacks to silence them. And investigative journalist networks are working to resolve the crimes against their fellow journalists while uncovering the stories that the perpetrators attempted to hide. But this is just a start. The solution still requires the collective efforts of member states, United Nations agencies, civil society organizations, regional human rights courts, and all judicial actors. So, if you're an actor in the judicial system, you can learn from successful prosecutions of crimes against journalists in other parts of the world and use these teachings to pursue cases in your own country. Because the best way to protect our journalists, to protect our collective rights, is not to give up on these cases, but to bring the perpetrators to justice. As always, the solution begins with awareness of the problem. So, by sharing this message, even if you feel that you're not directly involved, you are contributing to a global effort to end crimes against journalists and protecting freedom of expression and information.
So this is how, we can stop impunity for crimes against journalists, but that's not an easy task. The United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 2nd November as International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists in General Assembly Resolution 68 by 163. The resolution urged member states to implement definite measures countering the present culture of impunity. The date was chosen in commemoration of assassination of two French journalists in Mali on 2nd November 2013. This landmark resolution condemns all attacks and violence against journalists and media workers. It also urges member states to do their utmost to prevent violence against journalists and media workers, to ensure the accountability, bring to justice perpetrators of crimes against journalists and media workers, and to ensure that victims have access to appropriate remedies. It further calls upon states to promote a safe and enabling environment for journalists to perform their work independently and without undue interference. And we have a report, the World Trends in Freedom of Expression and Media Development series analyzes trends in media freedom, pluralism, independence, and the safety of journalists. This global report, published every 4 years since 2014, provides a macro-level perspective that informs UNESCO member states, international organizations, civil society groups, academia, and individuals seeking to understand the changing media scape. And also, it is important to foster freedom of expression. As a United Nations agency with a specific mandate to promote the free flow of ideas by words and image, UNESCO works to foster free, independent, and pluralistic media in print, broadcast, and online. Media development in this mode enhances freedom of expression, and it contributes to the peace, sustainability, poverty, eradication, and human rights. The UNESCO Director General's report is a unique mechanism within the UN system for monitoring killing of journalists. It was first published in 2008. The report on the safety of journalists and the danger of impunity. And this report is submitted every 2 years to the International Program for the Development of Communication, in short known as IPDC. And The Truth Never Dies is a campaign jointly by UNESCO and DDB Paris to commemorate the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. Basically, it's a campaign which was taken up in 2018. And as I mentioned, commemorating this 10th anniversary. And also, as we have seen the statistics between 2006 and 2020, over 1,200 journalists have been killed around the world, with a close to 9 out of 10 cases of these killings remaining judicially unresolved. According to the UNESCO's Observatory of Killed Journalists, impunity leads to more killings and is often a symptom of worsening conflict and breakdown of the law and judicial systems. UNESCO is concerned that impunity damages whole societies by covering up, serious human rights abuses, corruption, and crime. Government, civil society, and media, and everyone concerned to uphold the rule of law are being asked to join in global efforts to end impunity. In this recognition of the far-reaching consequences of impunity, especially of the crimes against journalists, that the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 68 by 163 at its 68th session in 2013, which proclaimed 2nd November as the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, that is IDEI in short. The resolution urged member states to implement definite measures countering to the present culture of impunity. The date was chosen in the commemoration of assassination of 2 French journalists in Mali on 2nd November 2013, as already mentioned. So 10th anniversary of the UN Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists to commemorate the 2022 International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, and also the 10th anniversary of the UN Plan of Action on Safety of Journalists and the issue of impunity. A conference convened by Austrian Minister of Foreign Affairs in collaboration with UNESCO and OHCHR will be organized on 3rd and 4th November in Vienna, Austria, that is tomorrow and day after tomorrow. The conference will provide a joint multi-stakeholder reflection process on how to prevent, protect, and prosecute crimes against journalists, and also aims to take stock of the achievements and challenges of the past 10 years in the implementation of the UN plan. The first day discusses strategies of tackling emergency issues. The second day, a ministerial conference will also take place, during which political commitment towards the implementation of the UN plan will be renewed. So regional and thematic consultations, UNESCO is organizing a series of consultations with local stakeholders to take a stock of the progress and challenges to protect journalists in the last 10 years and to strategize how to implement the plan more effectively. Building upon the success stories and the lessons learned in the specific context of each region, the consultations will inform a set of recommendations which will be presented at the ministerial conference in Vienna. And as stated by 2022 UNESCO Director General Report on the Safety of Journalists and the Issues of Impunity, the latest UNESCO data on killings of journalists show that the global impunity rate for the journalist killings remains shockingly high at 86%. Now, the recent data see 86%. It has gone up from 75 to 86%. And 2nd November, UNESCO renews its call for all necessary measures to ensure that crimes committed against journalists are properly investigated and their perpetrators identified and convicted. And 11% of women among all journalists killed in 2021 against 6% of the previous year. We have seen the increase among the total number of journalists who were killed. abuse, the amount of abuse, the percentage of abuse is high, more than 75% on women. But when compared to killings, it is 11% of the women among all journalists killed in 2021, which is a very high raise, almost doubled, against 6% of the previous year. And 86% of the global impunity rate for crimes against journalists has continuously decreased, and 89% in 2018. But it's still a greater percentage. So when it comes to protecting journalists, everyone has a part to play. If we are complacent, if we look away, we are part of the problem. So with this, we shall conclude the commemoration for this event, International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. Let us denounce any assaults and all on journalists and media professionals. So we'll move on to next commemorations for the day. Broadcast Traffic Professionals Day. It is also an international day. It is also known as Broadcast Traffic Professionals Day, along known as Traffic Directors Day and the National Professionals Day. Traffic here doesn't mean that which is traffic on the roads, but the traffic of communication, the traffic of broadcast and telecast. So it is celebrated every year on November 2nd to commemorate the first ever radio broadcast in the US, which occurred on November 2nd, 1920. This day is celebrated and mark the landmark and acknowledge, appreciate the hard work of broadcasting professionals who work behind the scenes and provide us with their services. Broadcast traffic professionals work diligently on shows, announcements, news, commercials, and talk shows to keep us entertained and engaged. And this day is celebrated to honor their hard work. When we look at the history, the Reginald Aubrey Fessenden broadcasts the first known radio program in the US from his experimental station at Brant Rock on Christmas Eve in 1906. The program consisted of musical selections from the reading of a poem and a short talk, which ship wireless operators heard within several hundred miles. After the conclusion of World War I and the subsequent relaxation of radio restrictions, many operated and experimental radio stations whose range was only a few miles. The first commercial radio station was KDKA in Pittsburgh, which aired on the evening of November 2nd, 1920, with the broadcast of the returns of the Harding-Cox presidential election. KDK broadcast and the musical programs initiated after it was a significant success, motivating others to install similar stations. By the end of 1921, a total of 8 stations were operating in the US. The years 1921 and 22 saw a rise in the sale of radio receiving sets and of component parts required for the home construction of sets, which was followed by a large-scale increase in number of transmitting stations. By November 1, 1922, 564 broadcasting stations were licensed. In 1927, Congress passed the Radio Act and set up the agency, which is now called the Federal Communications Commissions, FCC, which allocates wavelengths to the broadcasters in the US. So, who is the first radio broadcaster? As mentioned, it is Italian Guglielmo Marconi is credited with set up the setting up the world's first commercial radio service in 1898. And radio relies on electromagnetic waves, and it is through the process of transmitting, receiving these waves that radio broadcasting works. And when coming to television broadcasts, they started in 1940s in North America and Europe. So a lot of contribution, by the broadcasters or broadcasting professionals today. Broadcasting has a rich, diverse history. You can read up and make yourself aware that is evolved till now, and also spread awareness about the contribution of broadcast in progressing the world forward. Also spread the message about broadcasting professionals who work hard to give their best services, and appreciate broadcast professionals for their tireless work. Send them a heartfelt thank you and show them they are appreciated. And Lee D. Forrest, regarded as the father of radio broadcasting, climbed the Eiffel Tower and broadcasted a selection of music. And pirated radio, or Caroline FM, is the biggest UK pirate station, which never really became illegal because it operated outside any jurisdiction, that is from a boat. So pirate radio still exists because they are operating from a boat and ship, They are not under any jurisdiction, and they are never illegal. And broadcasting is still popular. Radios are still popular, and 92% of the American millennials encounter radio in some form during the week. Even in India, we see youngsters, teenagers, even middle-aged people also, hook up, connect to their FM radios. FM is quite popular, or even FM, or otherwise also radio. And John Peel was a much-loved broadcaster who gave exposure to nascent genres like hardcore and hip-hop. He loved the song Teenage Kicks by the Undertones in the West. And many countries have public broadcasting, like public broadcasting uses government money and to broadcast television shows and radio programs, such as BBC in Britain, NHK in Japan, and CBC in Canada, and CNN in America, and US, and Doordarshan in India, Akashvani in India. Akashvani is basically an radio, and Doordarshan television channel. So these are official broadcasters, broadcast in India by government. And why we love Broadcast Professionals Day? Because, they have been an integral part of our lives. There is no day where we won't listen to radio or TV or watch TV. So they have become an integral part of our lives, and they work tirelessly to provide us with their services. And this day is dedicated and is day to acknowledge and appreciate their work. It celebrates the rich history of broadcasting. Broadcasting has a rich history that evolved through time to be as it now. This day celebrates the evolution of broadcasting and the comfort it has given us through the ages. It is the celebration of music. Music is an integral part of broadcasting, and it is intricately intertwined with it. And this day celebrates the music introduced to us through broadcasting services. And today is also National Traffic Directors Day. Unless it falls on the weekend, every year on November 2nd, it is celebrated, in which case, if it falls on a weekend, in such a case, the day is celebrated on the following Monday. So this year it falls on November 2nd, and it is an opportunity to honor and celebrate the work behind the scenes of broadcasting carried out by traffic directors, who make sure that all the programming is well organized and flows smoothly. Traffic direction and management include handling the programming of broadcast station, particularly scheduling the advertisements of the channel. Traffic directors are also known as national traffic broadcasting traffic professionals, and it is also known as today's day is National Broadcast Traffic Professionals Day. So this Traffic Directors Day is a national celebration of the traffic directors in broadcasting that is celebrated on November 2nd every year. However, as already mentioned, if it falls on weekend, the next Monday is celebrated. So, and these are supported annually by the Traffic Directors Guild of America. The day itself is set aside to honor traffic management and direction in broadcasting, which is part of behind the scenes work of programming, scheduling, advertisements, and programs for broadcasting agencies and channels. The job of traffic director is especially important when it comes to advertisements. The traffic director is responsible for being aware of the airtime set aside for commercial purposes and managing the commercial programming or the advertisements along with the regular programming, depending on the number of listeners at any given time. This work requires a careful balancing act, as it is important to give the advertisements the time they need without driving off the listeners. Sometimes we see there are too many advertisements distracting us, and so the right kind of placement of advertisement is a great skill. And this work requires a great balancing act, and the traffic director is also responsible for determining the correct rates for the available right time and selling them to the advertisers at competitive rates that help support the broadcasting company. We see there is a prime time, morning 6 to 9 and evening 6 to 9 is a prime time where the, airtime is very costly, for giving advertisement at those times is really very costly. So, especially that is a time where, media makes money, huge money. Of course, that is also not adequate because the kind of expenses they have. So they have to properly plan available airtime and sell them to advertisers at a competitive rate. So to leverage the, income. Apart from the advertisements, traffic directors do rely on technology to automate their work, especially when coordinating between departments. The traffic in broadcasting refers to entire programming schedule, which includes daily programs, advertisements, and public service announcements, which are all managed by these using broadcast management software. So broadcast traffic should not exceed 20% of the total traffic to prevent a broadcast storm. Basically here, it means advertisements should not exceed 20% of the total traffic. Otherwise, it can be a broadcast storm. Too many advertisements will spoil the show. A broadcast system is in any video or audio-based satellite system that can receive and dispense information across systems. And there are two main types of broadcast management systems, which is linear and non-linear channels. So the linear technology is the oldest technology, and present non-linear channel or technology is the latest technology. And yes, call your local broadcasting office and ask their traffic directors and share your appreciation for their hard work and behind the scenes. So here also you can call up, radio stations or, TV channels and convey their your gratitude or greetings or wishes to them. This is a day, or if you know any media professional, you can just call up or message them. and get online and share information about all the school work that traffic directors do. Now that you know what traffic directors do. So this way, more people will be able to appreciate their local broadcasting professionals and organize a networking meet, organize with your local agencies, bring broadcasting professionals together so that they can discuss their unique profession and exchange tips and opportunities. That's what we are also doing now, bringing awareness and discussing on various aspects of this profession and practice. And broadcasting is more popular than ever, despite the general doom and gloom around developing technologies. Almost 92% of the adults listen to some kind of broadcasting every day. And most public broadcasting is by educational institutions. Educational institutions control the majority of public broadcasts, which makes the traffic director's job particularly tricky. And there are also community broadcasters who work independently, and most of the people who work in these companies are volunteers. And it is not uncommon to have commercials played continuously for 18 to 20 minutes in a single hour. And airtime is for sale. That's how, they survive. And there are many different roles behind the scenes of broadcasting. There are over 30 different roles performed by various people to keep the broadcast flowing. It's not a simple and easy job. We need a lot of professionals, technicians, who are behind the scenes to keep the shows running. And we love learning different jobs and about different kinds of jobs and skills required to make things. We may take it for granted, but we think that traffic directors have a unique and important profession. We think that people behind the scenes deserve to be appreciated publicly. So we want to show that we love the essential work they do and are grateful for them. And we want more people to know about traffic directors and their work. So we also want to open up possibilities for young people about different careers they could make into. And finally, today is also National Stress Awareness Day. Is on every first Wednesday in November. November 2nd this year is 24 hours of reinforcing the fact that you are not doing yourself a favor by stressing about situations you can't control. In fact, according to science, chronic stress leads to impaired cognitive and physiological functions, would you want to age before your time? Absolutely not. On this day, let's learn together to hone our ability to choose one thought over other and let the stress ebb away. So National Stress Awareness Day is a sponsored event by International Stress Management Association, in short known as ISMA, which is registered charity promoting knowledge about stress, best practices for stress management, well-being, and performance that are recognized nationally and internationally as well. National Stress Awareness Day, every first Wednesday in November, was founded by Carol Spires, the chairman of ISMA, to increase public awareness and help recognize, manage, and reduce stress in their personal and professional lives. The organization devises strategies backed by data and science to educate employers and employees about dealing with stress at workplaces and establishing programs with their organizations for that purpose. It provides a comprehensive guides for the people to monitor stress, stress management, look after their health and well-being, Chronic stress, that is failure to deal with for a long time, remaining in a prolonged and constant feeling of stress can lead to life-threatening problems from hypertension, heart diseases, decreased immunity, loss of sociability, and decreased mental vitality. Stress is not to be taken lightly. And to break the chain reaction, National Stress Awareness Day is a day-long event to take a deep breath and embrace peace. The day is celebrated midweek on Wednesday, usually the most exhausting, stressful day, to remind individuals and companies to and the day is celebrated midweek on Wednesday, usually the most exhausting, stressful day, to remind individuals and companies that stress management is fundamental for optimum experience. So what causes stress? It's our own body's automated response to pressure, commonly known as a fight or flight response. Causes, according to experts, are chronic illness or injury, emotional problems like depression, anxiety, anger, grief, guilt, low self-esteem, taking care of an elderly or sick family member, or traumatic events such as so taking care of an elderly or sick or family member, traumatic events such as natural disaster, theft, rape, or violence against you or your loved one. So some of the psychological and emotional signs that you are stressed out include depression or anxiety, anger, irritability or restlessness, feeling overwhelmed, feeling overwhelmed, unmotivated or unfocused, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, racing thoughts or constant worry, problems with your memory or so how do we manage our stress? There are hundreds of activities, foods, and mindful approaches to reduce the impact of stress. The most effective ones are regular exercising, a good diet, and laughing. Keep away from negative vibes and do things that you love. Go for a walk, get massage, or take a long and hot bath and hang out with your friends, whatever you want. can take an off to your work and contemplate your stress points. It's not just about one day. Stress management and reduction should be constant practice so that you can completely remove stress from your life. While we don't really get enough time to think about it any other day, use this day to find out where and why. And laugh all day long. That's a challenge. Prepare with your friends, family, and do things that would make all of you laugh and have the best time possible. Plan a party with skits, a session to say the jokes within the winner, and come on getting a prize, and simply watch the funniest movie scenes, etc. Throughout the day, laugh away. It is the best medicine for stress. So, are you in stress or you stress? Scientists like to refer to good stress as you stress. It affects everyone differently. So stress affects everyone differently. Unlike other conditions, stress has different symptoms for different people. So you can't really tell when you are experiencing stress. And it is also a silent killer. Stress is also classified as a silent killer because it is usually the root cause of most heart diseases. And it also causes stress is also a silent killer, also classified under silent killer because it's usually the root cause of the most heart diseases. And it causes hair loss also. If you are going bald, if you are likely going through stress unless, of course, you are already 50. And taking the slogan literally, you live only once. When you realize that you live only once, you realize that stressing about situations that you never had no control. And stress leads to serious health problems. It can't be emphasized enough that stress is one of the main causes of serious health complications on the body and brain. Some stress is good. It's important. Differentiate. Some sorts of stresses motivate you to perform better, encourage growth, and give meaning to your life. And differentiating begin with good and bad stress is crucially important for a life, for a healthy life. And with this, we shall end the commemoration for the day. Thank you everyone for joining us. Before leaving, quickly fill up the feedback form. And certificates for daily sessions have been updated. Weekly Sunday special day events are yet to be updated. For daily thing, till yesterday, you can download from the website. So quickly fill up the feedback form. Feedback form has been raised. Dear friends, quickly fill up the feedback form before you leave the webinar. And see you all tomorrow. Take care. Good night at the same time. Dear friends, quickly fill up the feedback form